Welcome back, everyone. Tonight's story starts with a woman living a double life and a man who is a master of death. She's a ghost in the system, an undercover officer buried deep in the city's underbelly, and he is the shadow that even the shadows fear. She thought they were just two lonely souls who found each other in the wreckage of a broken city, both looking for a way out. She had no idea that the man she was falling for was the very phantom she had been sworn to hunt, until the final file landed on her desk and the face she kissed every morning was the one in the crosshairs. Let's begin. The elevator was a cage of brushed steel and reinforced glass, rising 60 floors above the city's rain-slicked veins. Elara stood in the center, her back straight, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She counted the seconds between the floors. 3, 6, 9. She always counted when the air felt too thin. She wore a silk dress the color of a bruised plum. It was elegant, deceptively fragile, and hideously expensive, a costume designed to make her look like the socialite daughter of a shipping magnate. But beneath the silk, strapped to the inside of her thigh, was a subcompact 9mm. The weight of it was a cold, familiar comfort against her skin, a reminder of the badge she'd left in a locked drawer 3 miles away. The elevator's doors slid open with a sharp hiss of pressurized air. The penthouse was a fortress of marble and obsidian, lit by the cold blue glow of the city skyline. It didn't feel like a gala. It felt like a curated exhibit of power. The air was chilled to a precise 68 degrees, smelling of expensive gin and the faint metallic tang of the building's heavy-duty filtration system. Elara stepped out, her heels clicking against the stone floor. 1, 2, 3. She mapped the exits without turning her head. 4 guards by the main terrace, 2 by the private office. All of them stood with a specific, practiced stillness, the posture of men who were paid to be violent so their employers didn't have to be. She moved toward the bar, her gaze drifting over the crowd. She wasn't here for the champagne. She was here for a ghost. For 6 months, the department had been chasing a shadow known only as the Architect, a phantom who had dismantled 3 high-ranking officials with surgical precision. And then she saw him. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of amber liquid in his hand that he hadn't touched. He didn't need to talk. He commanded the space around him by simply occupying it. He was taller than the men around him, his shoulders broad under a tailored black suit that fit like armor. His name was Julian. To her, for the last 3 months, he was the man who liked his coffee black and read pre-war poetry in the park. He was the man who kissed her in the rain and told her she was the only thing in this city that felt real. He caught her eye across the room. There was no smile of recognition, just a slow, deliberate tilt of his head. He began to walk toward her, his stride heavy and purposeful. The crowd seemed to part for him instinctively, a silent acknowledgement of the danger he carried in the set of his shoulders. "You're late," he said when he reached her. His voice was a low vibration, a sound that felt like it started in the floorboards. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, a sharp contrast to the cold marble of the penthouse. "I had to make sure I wasn't followed," Elara whispered, the lie tasting like copper in her mouth. Julian's eyes moved over her face, searching for something she wasn't sure she wanted him to find. He reached out, his thumb grazing the line of her jaw. His skin was rough, calloused, the hands of a man who knew the weight of a trigger, not the weight of a pin. "In this city," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "everyone is being followed. The trick is knowing who's holding the leash." The gala continued to hum around them, a symphony of tinkling crystal and low-frequency greed. But for Elara, the world had narrowed to the 3 feet of space between her and Julian. She was hyper-aware of everything. The way the cold air from the terrace stirred the loose strands of hair at her neck, the way her own heart felt like a trapped bird beating against the cage of her ribs. She was trained to notice anomalies. It was how she stayed alive. And Julian was a walking anomaly. In the 3 months she'd known him, he was the man who forgot his keys and laughed about it. He was the man who had a scar on his thumb from a kitchen accident. But standing here, in the heart of the city's most dangerous penthouse, the mask didn't just slip, it dissolved. As they stood together, a man approached. He was a known fixer for the local syndicates, a man who didn't flinch at anything. But as he drew near Julian, Elara watched the man's eyes. They didn't just flicker with recognition, they dropped. His posture shifted, his shoulders hunching inward as if trying to take up less space. He didn't speak. He simply veered off his path, giving Julian a wide, respectful berth. Julian didn't even look at him. His focus remained entirely on Elara, his gaze heavy and possessive. "You're shivering," he murmured. He didn't ask if she was cold. He stated it as a tactical observation. "The AC is high," she lied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking in her blood. She was counting again. 1, 2, 3. "Is it?" Julian's hand moved. It was a slow, deliberate motion. He reached out and placed his hand on the small of her back. The heat of his palm burned through the silk of her dress. It wasn't the touch of a boyfriend. It was the hand resting protectively of a predator marking what belonged to him. His fingers brushed against the fabric just inches above where her 9mm was strapped to her thigh. Elara froze. If he moved his hand 6 inches lower, the charade was over. "Let's fit some air," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. He led her toward the terrace. As they walked, Elara noticed the guards. They didn't challenge them. They didn't even ask for ID. As Julian passed, the lead guard, a man Elara knew to be a stone-cold killer, stiffened his spine and gave a sharp, nearly imperceptible nod. It was a bow, a silent, high-status acknowledgement. They stepped out onto the balcony. The city stretched out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The wind was sharper here, smelling of ozone and incoming rain. Julian walked to the stone railing and looked out, his jaw tightening, his profile looking like it had been carved from the same obsidian as the floor inside. "You shouldn't have come tonight, Elara," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Why? You invited me." "You invited the girl who likes poetry," he said, finally turning to look at her. His eyes were a degree quieter now, darker than the sky behind him. "But that's not who walked onto this balcony, is it?" Elara felt the blood drain from her face. She reached for the champagne glass she was holding, her knuckles turning white, her breath hitching in her throat. 1, 2, 3. Julian didn't look like a man who had just confessed to being a ghost. He looked like the judge, the jury, and the executioner all at once. He stepped into her space, his shadow swallowing hers against the stone railing. He was so close, she could see the faint, jagged scar that ran from the corner of his left eye into his hairline, a mark she had once kissed thinking it was a childhood fall. Now she saw it for what it was, a close encounter with a blade. "How long have you known?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Since the second date," Julian said, his voice flat, devoid of the warmth he'd shared when they shared pizza on her fire escalator. "You have a tell, Elara. When you're off the clock, you try too hard to be soft, but your eyes never stop scanning for the throat." He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her collarbone. It was a slow, agonizingly intimate gesture, but there was no affection in it. His hand was steady, his pulse likely as calm as the sea before a storm. "I was sent here to find the man who dismantled the Petrov syndicate," she said, her training finally kicking in, her voice hardening. "The man they call the architect. I didn't think I'd be sleeping next to him." "And I was sent here to clear the board," Julian countered. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. His eyes were a degree quieter now, a deep, predatory void. "I knew there was a mole in the precinct. I just didn't expect the mole to have such a beautiful laugh." Elara's hand shifted toward her thigh.
It was a micro-movement, a fraction of an inch, but Julian's hand was faster. He didn't grab her. He simply placed his palm over hers, pinning her arm against the railing. His touch was like iron wrapped in velvet. "Don't," he cautioned. "If you pull that trigger, my men will have this floor cleared and your body in the river before the shell casing hits the stone. I've spent 10 years perfecting the art of being invisible. Do you really think a girl with a badge and a counting habit is the one to bring me down?" "I'm not just a girl with a badge," she spat, her jaw tightening. "I'm the person who knows you like your eggs over easy and that you have nightmares about a fire in a house with blue shutters. I know the man, Julian. The architect is just a mask." For the first time, his expression shifted. The tight muscle in his jaw leaped. His eyes didn't soften, but they flickered with a raw, jagged pain that he couldn't hide behind a tailored suit. He looked at her not as a target, but as a betrayal. "The man you know is a luxury I can't afford, and the woman I know, she's the only target I've ever had that I didn't want to finish." He let go of her hand, stepping back into the shadows of the terrace. The wind picked up, whipping her hair across her face, smelling of rain and the cold, metallic scent of the city. "Go home, Elara," he said, his back to her. "Walk out of here, resign, leave the city. If I see you after tonight, I won't be Julian, and you won't be the girl from the park. We'll just be two people doing what we were trained to do." He didn't wait for her answer. He walked back toward the glass doors, the guards snapping to attention as he approached. Elara stood alone on the balcony, the counting in her head finally stopping. There was no more math left to do. The man she loved had just given her a head start, and she knew with a sinking certainty that she wasn't going to take it. The rain Elara had smelled on the wind finally arrived, a sudden, cold downpour that turned the city lights into blurred smears of neon. She didn't leave the penthouse. She couldn't. Instead, she moved through the retreating crowd, her silk dress clinging to her legs like a second skin. She felt heavy, weighted down by the truth that had just been handed to her. She found herself back at the bar, but the gin no longer looked like an exhibit. It looked like medicine. As she reached for a glass, a small white envelope caught her eye, tucked neatly under the base of her original, untouched champagne flute. There was no name on it, no stamp, just a scent, the faint, lingering scent of cedarwood and gun oil. Elara retreated to the shadowed hallway near the private offices, her fingers trembling as she tore the seal. Inside was a single high-resolution photograph and a scrap of paper with 3 words written in a sharp, elegant hand. "The primary target." The photo wasn't of a mob boss or a corrupt politician. It was a surveillance shot taken 3 days ago. It showed a man in a black tactical hoodie standing in an alleyway, his face partially obscured. But Elara didn't need to see his face. She recognized the watch on his wrist, the vintage silver timepiece Julian always wore, the one he claimed was a gift from a grandfather who didn't exist. But it wasn't the man in the photo that stopped her heart. It was the person he was meeting. In the corner of the frame, caught in the glow of a street lamp, her captain was standing, the man who had given her this assignment, the man who had told her Julian was the enemy. They weren't fighting, they were shaking hands. The secret reveal hit her with the force of a physical blow. Julian wasn't the target, he was the asset, and she wasn't the hunter, she was the loose end. She realized then why Julian had told her to run. He hadn't been protecting his secret from her. He was protecting her from the truth of what her own department had become. The architect wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was a state-sanctioned ghost used to clean up the messes that the badge couldn't touch. The internal monologue she'd kept so tightly wound for months finally snapped. 1, 2, 3. She wasn't counting exits anymore. She was counting the people she could trust, and the number was 0. A shadow fell over the paper. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The air grew a degree quieter, the hum of the gala fading into the background. You weren't supposed to see that until you were across the state line. Julian said, his silhouette tall and imposing against the blue light of the terrace. The captain? Elara started, her voice a ghost of itself. He's in on it. All of it.
He is it, Julian corrected, stepping into the light. He looked older now, the lines around his eyes deeper. The architect isn't one man, Elara. It's a project. I'm just the hand that holds the scalpel. And you were the only variable they couldn't control. He walked toward her, his boots silent on the marble. When he reached her, he didn't take the photo. He took her hand. His skin was cold from the rain, but his grip was as steady as a mountain. The file on your desk tomorrow morning, the one with my face on it, Julian whispered, leaning in so close their foreheads touched. That wasn't a mission briefing. It was an execution order for both of us. The bond wasn't just a romance anymore. It was a pact of survival. The undercover cop and the deadly assassin were no longer on opposite sides of the law. They were the only two people left outside of it. Tonight, the hunter became the hunted, and the ghost found a reason to stay visible. Elara and Julian started as enemies in a game played by giants, but they're ending the night as the only two people who know where the bodies are buried. The city is still sleeping, unaware that its protectors and its predators have just traded places. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this high-stakes encounter. If you enjoyed the tension and the twists of this undercover story, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Don't forget to give this video a like if you want to see more stories like this one. Now, I have to ask you, if you found out your entire career was a lie, would you run away to start over, or would you stay and burn the system down with the person you love? Are you Team Justice, believing Elara should take the captain down, or Team Shadow, wanting her and Julian to disappear forever? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and I can't wait to hear what you think. The story is far from over. Watch out for part 2, where the real hunt begins. Until next time, stay sharp and keep counting.